You're listening to the Wayward Atheist Podcast. Hello, everyone. If this is your first time listening, thank you for joining us. This is a podcast where borders collide, where the gloves are off, where filters are removed, where we tell you exactly what we think about the news, politics, and religion. The Wayward Atheist Podcast is dedicated to free thought, reason, and the pursuit of truth. You can follow us on Twitter at Wayward Atheist, on Spreaker, Stitcher, and iTunes. You can email us at waywardatheistpodcast@gmail.com or leave us a comment on our Facebook page. So without further ado, let's get on with the show.
This week's episode of The Wayward Atheist has been brought to you by the Crafty Freethinker, atheist, humanist, and secular jewelry for those who don't like the idea of wearing a torture device around their neck. Find the Crafty Freethinker on Etsy and Amazon. Links are in the show notes, or simply Google the Crafty Freethinker as one word. Hello and welcome to the Wayward Atheist Podcast. I'm Dave, a.k.a. the Great White North.
I'm Corinne, a.k.a. the Yank.
I'm Big Black Gay Dave.
I'm Son Winks.
And I'm Ed Smith, the Everyday Atheist.
And tonight we are joined by
Bryce Blankenagel of the Naked Mormonism Podcast. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Bryce, and welcome to our little show.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm rather excited to be on. You guys, what are we talking? Mormonism, atheism? I'm pretty much just a two-trick pony at this point.
We're gonna talk. You're here, and of course, Edward. Kind of how we got involved with Edward was, I was listening to Cash, and he was talking about an ex-Mormon out in Newfoundland that had been alone in atheism for the past 10 years. So I searched him out on Facebook and got him on the show. So we'll be talking Mormonism and we'll be talking Catholicism tonight.
Oh, fantastic. It's interesting the many parallels they share. So this is a very deep discussion. All right. Cool.
And we're going to do, some in the news on, Mormon news as well.
Even more exciting. That's even better. I love it. I love some Mormon current events.
Well, Bryce, first and foremost, thanks again for joining us. And we're just wondering if you would like to share with the audience a little bit about yourself and your podcast and how you became an atheist.
Yeah, I'm happy to share that to anybody that doesn't mind getting bored for a few minutes, definitely. So I was born and raised in Mormonism, just in a small city north of Salt Lake. And I kind of left when I was about 15, 16 years old, when I just didn't like going to church anymore. And that's when I started just becoming apathetic, not really atheist or agnostic, just not liking church. That's it. Fast forward a few years after that, I got to a point where I started studying Mormon history and seeing what exactly it was that I actually believed and what I should believe. And that kind of led me down the road of studying deep into Mormon history and starting a podcast all about it. So that's what I do. It's the Mormon history, or the Serial Mormon History Podcast. Episode 1 starts with the birth of Joseph Smith, and then it just advances through the timeline from there, and more characters get introduced, and it's a riveting situation. I absolutely love studying it. So yeah, it was a pretty quick journey to become an atheist, though. I was surprised how long it took me of just studying world religions to become, solid atheist. So it's weird how that works. I get the same from a lot of atheists. I hear a lot of them say the same exact thing. As soon as they started studying other religions, that's all it took, and they became an atheist. So that's a camp I fall into.
Awesome. One of the things I wanted to bring up in this segment with you, Bryce, is the CES letter. Just a couple items from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for those who don't know what the CES letter is, it's a letter that was drawn up to a church director by a man named Jeremy Reynolds. And Jeremy Reynolds had some very serious questions that he wanted answered because of lots of articles in the news about new Mormon history, or history that the LDS had tried to keep away from the average Mormon. And so he had a list of questions and some statements that basically he drilled home his concerns. And I think he's still waiting for a reply, isn't he, Bryce?
Well, he did get a proper Mormon reply. Jeremy was excommunicated just a few months ago. And to be honest, this is something that the church does oftentimes when people bring up contradictions or problems. They'll just bring them into what's called a disciplinary council or a tribunal and just say, you're gone. You're excommunicated out of the church. But I have to commend Jeremy Runnels for what he did with the entire excommunication ceremony, because he took a watch camera in and he recorded the entire thing, audio and video. And you can look it up online and you can see the actual excommunication tribunal, what happened there. And he says multiple times, if there's anything that I wrote down in the CES letter that's wrong, please tell me, because I need to address it if it's wrong, or if there's something that's challenging, you need to address it. And he openly asks them many times, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are problems with race in the priesthood, there are problems with Mormon history, there are problems with Joseph Smith treasure hunting and him being convicted as a treasure seeker. And so he brought up all of these problems, and the tribunal, the maybe 12 or 15 guys that are there reviewing him, deciding if he should be excommunicated or not, they were just staring him down, just stone-faced, not saying a word. And it was perfectly indicative of what these excommunication ceremonies are, and so analogous to just the church's stance as a whole on the CES letter and on the history of the church. It's just amazing. Just complete and utter silence, because they have absolutely no answer for the problems that are raised in the CES letter.
I have a question for both of you, Blake and Edward.
Blake.
Is it Blake? Sorry, Bryce. It said it's blank.
Hey.
Oh, blank.
Dude,
Blank.
Blankenagel.
No,
I
it's
get
bacon, egg, and cheese a bagel. In third grade, when I broke my foot, it was broken ankle. Just whatever you call me, I'll answer to it. Okay.
It's
Okay.
the best last name ever.
We will edit that part out, and I will start over.
No,
Bryce.
no,
and
don't you
Edward.
dare edit that out. Don't you dare. That is part of the public record right now, and I have a copy of it.
Anyways, as a pretty much lifelong atheist, I never kind of understood the reasoning or the thought behind adult people and even teenagers giving authority to somebody that doesn't really have authority. It's like a perceived authority of a bunch of old dick faces. They're like, you have to come in and confess, or you have to come in and, if you jerked off, you have to tell us that you jerked off. And if you jerked off, you're excommunicated. Like, fuck you. You don't have any authority. Like, they don't have any authority at all. You guys are giving him the authority. So maybe you guys can quickly do a little thought process on handing over authority to people that don't actually have any authority.
It's a matter of the authority that the members give them, right? It's like, okay, so a person that is like a manager, right? They're given the authority of manager over a certain portion of the company by the people that that they represent or that they manage, and the people that are over them. Well, the Mormon Church is just a business. That's all it is, and they have middle managers, and that's who these middle managers are. They're people that are supposedly called by God to be a leader in a small community, a stake president and a bishop. So the authority is very real to them and to the people that it affects. But from us on the outside, we can look at it and be like, that's just bullshit. He just calls himself a bishop or a stake president or a patriarch. He doesn't actually have any say over my life. Like, he doesn't have any, effect on my paycheck. But they do have an effect on the member's eternity. If you are a member and your bishop basically has reason to excommunicate you, that means that if you believe in the tenets of Mormonism, that you are no longer getting to Mormon heaven. So not only it's so much more sinister than like a business model where you can get fired, or you can you get a demotion or have your paycheck withheld or whatever it might be. It's holding your eternal life at ransom. So for that reason, I would say that their authority probably has much more power over the members of the church than any boss or any middle manager does over the lives of the people that they manage. And that authority is very real when it's felt by the people that it's affecting. But in the case of like Jeremy Runnels, with the guy that wrote the CES letter, by the end of his excommunication ceremony, I guess you could call it, he just said, I am done with this. I'm done with this kangaroo court, and I'm excommunicating the church from my life. And he handed him his resignation letter because the dude could see through the bullshit. They no longer had power over him. But for the vast majority of the members that can't see through the bullshit, that authority is very, very real.
And can I ask, do you think the isolationist nature, particularly to Mormonism, I think a little bit with JWs, is probably also quite accurate. Do you think the isolationist nature of the religion also prevents people from ceasing that authority?
Well, I mean, for me personally, son, the social anxiety of leaving the church was more of a damaging part than actually I wasn't excommunicated, but even if I was, the social part of it, where people will turn their backs, people that you spent a lifetime with, that you thought were your friends and family, they turn their back on you, and you're on your own. That social pressure almost makes leaving an impossibility for some people.
You had a hard time breaking up with girls in high school, didn't you, Edward?
No, I didn't date in high school.
What the fuck?
Good answer. Because he was getting ready for his mission, right?
Correct.
That's what matters. Yep. You can't date until you're 16, and then you only get 2 years of fun until you go on your mission. But that's inside Mormon shit, so never mind.
Is that for real?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So you're not even allowed to date until you're 16?
And that's group dating at that point.
Yeah. Yep.
You know what? All the weird
Like
shit
orgies?
I know about Mormonism, there's so much weirder shit. Like, what is like one of the things about Mormonism that's really fucked up that most people don't know?
The ordinances in the temple.
Right. There's a good one. Or how about blood atonement that used to be part of the ordinances, where you would symbolically slit your throat and disembowel yourself if you didn't avenge the blood of the prophets under the third and fourth generation. They only took that out in the 90s. In the 1990s, that was still part of it. They would symbolically cut themselves.
What's the ordinance?
It's a group of...
Oh, shit. What is it? Do you...
Well, Bryce left when he was 15. He didn't have an opportunity to go to the temple to get ordinances done, personal ordinances for himself. But basically or the whole idea of it is that they're cleansing you figuratively and spiritually, I guess, and preparing you to be able to receive, to get married, to be able to go on a mission, and basically they're trying to protect you, quote unquote, from any spiritual adversaries that come up. It's kind of a queer thing, because that's at that point you get your Mormon magic underwear at that point, you know?
So what do they actually do when they prepare you? What is the actual things that they do?
Well, one thing that you do is you go through this cleansing, and you basically, men and women are separated. And once they go in the temple, men go one way, women go another. And men have to go into a room where they're basically naked, except for this white poncho that goes over you. And they anoint you with oil in various parts of your body, basically.
Yeah, and it's like it's on the forehead and on the chest and on where all is it?
Your navel, basically. Your
navel.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
It's
your
pretty gay.
It's and your dick too. Tell me.
Yeah.
They used to go to your groin, but I think a lot of people kicked up about it, so they ixed that one out of there.
Okay, I have one more question. I've heard stories, and I don't know how true they are because, the internet is not always right. But during baptisms, because men have to perform them with women and they have their frickin' white underwear on, that, guys get handsy with the women. Is that true? And vice versa, I'd imagine. I'd be like, what's that bulging down there?
Well, it's not common that,
No, okay.
But
because the article I read made it seem like it was so common. And I was like, I think there would be more of an uproar about it.
The thing is, whenever somebody is baptized, there's a lot of spectators, whether you're doing the baptisms for the dead in the temple or somebody that's being, induced into a member of the church is being baptized in the actual church. There's always a bunch of people gathered around. So if there is any handsy stuff, that person would get called out on it pretty quickly, I would think. So I can't imagine that it happens very frequently at all. And if it ever does, they probably say stuff about it.
Yeah.
Can I ask another question?
Do
you have some sort of statistics or information on how many people that are adults join the Mormon church? So not indoctrinated from a young age, but that are adults. And then the subsequent question, why do you think those adults would choose to join that religion?
I don't have the statistics, son, but I think a lot prior to the internet, the vast internet that we have now, that we're able to search things. Prior to that, Mormonism was quickly growing really fast, and in my own experience as a missionary, we baptized a lot of adult people, and it was because when you get a person who, what we call someone who is open to talking and communicating and wanting to get the lessons, quote unquote, they're already religious in some sort. You're not going to get very many atheists that are going to approach that will accept it. But I think that the biggest thing that you're appealing to is the almost complete picture that the Mormons put forward, and it's hard to explain, son, unless I go through the whole plan of salvation. But Mormons have it's almost militarily constructed a program by which it takes in all the ambiguous nature that other, like Catholicism, has about the Trinity. It takes all of that and makes it really simplistic and makes it really sound appealing. But the biggest thing of all, I think, is the family connection, and how Mormons were very big on the family unit, and people see that, and I think that is being not just a family on earth, but being able to be sealed as a family for all time and eternity, I think is the biggest draw.
So if I could, I'll just read off some statistics, just talking about the missionary program itself. And this is from a Deseret News article, and the Deseret News is actually the church-owned, basically, news agency. So these numbers are basically their self-reported numbers, and they're pretty trustworthy, I would say. So they said that in the year 2015, they had 296,000 converts, almost 297,000 converts.
Hang on, Bryce. I just want to interject. You say that the church is trustworthy, but are they counting the after-death baptism in that?
No, that's not including after-death baptisms. Those are a separate statistic.
Okay.
Yeah, so those are included in under temple work, and you can find those statistics as well. But you have to dig a lot deeper for those. But this is just as far as new converts go. So what happened in the year 2015, the church changed, in the year 2012, the church changed its missionary age from 19 years old to 18 years old. There's a couple reasons they did this. One, too many young men were in this limbo year from when they graduated high school to when they went on their mission, and they didn't know what to do. Oftentimes they would go to like 1 year of college. They would learn a whole bunch of that, liberal, atheist bullshit stuff that you learn at those damn liberal colleges, and then they wouldn't go on their mission. So changing the age from 19 to 18, making it so as soon as a guy gets out of high school, he can go on his mission right then, it increased their missionary numbers by 44%. They had 44% growth in the number of missionaries. I mean, that's absolutely mind-blowing. So that means that by the end of 2015, there were 85,150 missionaries serving in various parts of the world. But that 297,000 convert number, that's not just adults, that's families, that's parents, that's anybody that's over 8 years old, that's entire families. So as far as adults and what faiths they came from, there's no way of telling. But that was only a 9% increase over the last year before that. So they had a 44% increase in missionary numbers and only a 9% increase in actual numbers of converts. So it's pretty much, you can say that it was a lost investment, basically. And all it's doing is forcing these kids to, these missionaries to be further indoctrinated into a system that they have no way to get out of.
Well, it's probably not a lost investment because, like you said, those 19, now 18-year-olds have no access to the real world for, one less year of their lives. So they're more indoctrinated.
It is a series of brainwashing that you go through. You spend 2 months, 1 to 2 months, depending on if you're going through a foreign language or not, at the missionary training center, where you're surrounded constantly by Mormonist doctrine, and you are totally encapsulated in that for 2 years. You're not allowed to use the phone. You're not allowed to read newspapers, watch TV. You're not allowed on the internet. There wasn't that in my case very much anyway. But you're not allowed to listen to the radio. Where I lived in Delano, which is pretty near Bakersfield in California, we weren't allowed to listen to the smog advisories. We would get a call from the mission president every morning to say if we could go out or not. So it's
yeah.
Can I ask you real quick? We all know, like, my question is, how is Mormonism still a thing? Take aside from the fact that we all know that that Joseph Smith was a con man, that it's impossible that he found golden tablets in New York, but the Mormon Church themselves tried to prove that the Native Americans were Israelis. They took the DNA and there was no relation. So how do people reconcile the fact that their own church failed to prove that the Native Americans are descendants of Jesus Christ?
You're talking about facts like they actually matter to Mormons. That's just, they don't give a shit. I mean,
but it was a fact that
most Mormons aren't going to dive into the apologetic.
It was a fact that they tried to prove, though. It wasn't like the atheists.
You're absolutely right. And the 13 essays that are online that are, very, very damning essays talking about Joseph's polygamy, talking about race in the priesthood. They're very harsh essays to actually read through with a critical mind, but almost no Mormons, active Mormons that go every single Sunday, even know about the essays, and that's hosted on the LDS.org website. And those were only published over the last 3 or 4 years. They weren't the DNA study that was done in 1956. I mean, none of what you're talking about actually matters to believing Mormons. They just don't pay attention to it.
And even furthermore, they're almost told that only approved Mormon sources are believable.
But it was Mormons that did it, Edward. It was Mormons that did the DNA testing because they were trying to prove their religion, and it turned out to be false. So how is that not? It's mind-boggling to somebody that was never.
Because David, what they do is sleight of hand, and what they say is, no, they're not. It was once said in the Book of Mormon that they were the principal descendants of, ancestors of the modern Native Americans. Now they say they're just one of them. So that slight little.
Yeah, but how would that not? Okay, and I'm sorry because, like, I understand that people are like, but it should have. I guess what I'm trying to say is it should have put a seed of doubt in more people's minds than it seems to have, and it should be a bigger deal, and it should be brought up more when speaking to Mormons about Mormonism. Like, just forget about the Joseph Smith stuff. The DNA, that's concrete, right?
I would say, okay, so the apologetics behind it are, they say we'll eventually find it. They say, there's must have been a smaller subsect, the Lamanites are a smaller subsect of the Native Americans than we initially anticipated. And they can even retreat behind saying, well, of all of the tribes that were wiped out when smallpox and measles ravaged all of the Native Americans. I mean, we're talking 95% of the Native Americans at highest estimates died from old world diseases when the conquistadors first came over and spread them. So they can just say, well, the Lamanites were obviously one of the tribes that just died off. Simple as that. And then you can say, but Joseph Smith in October of 1830, he commanded the first missionary tribe to go on the border of the Lamanites and preach to the Lamanites to bring them to the church. He was calling the Native Americans in Missouri actual Lamanites. That was their prophet, Joseph Smith, and they won't listen. They don't care. That's facts that they don't care about. They're not going to pay attention. It's the same thing as, like, there are Christians who have done a lot of study on anthropology and, paleoanthropological studies of, different skeletons and different hominids that we've seen and we've studied and dug out of the ground. So why the hell do Christians, deny evolution? It's the same thing with Mormons. Mormonism, the Mormon Church has done a lot of studies on their own history and on the DNA and on archaeological findings, and they've found nothing but stuff that disproves Mormonism. But Mormons don't care. They don't research that. They don't look it up.
Dave, I think the difference is that you haven't been indoctrinated. It's not until, like Ed and I have described it historically when we've discussed this, it's like you have got some sort of God glasses, and everything that you see in the world is filtered through those things. So obviously Mormons get Mormon God glasses, and I had Seventh-day Adventist God glasses, but everything that you filter in your life is through those. It isn't until you remove them that you see what bullshit it is. And
what does that feel like, son? Because I've never been a believer. So what does that feel like when you...
I think it's probably individual for lots of people. And for me, it was a long journey. It wasn't a sudden journey, but I believe Ed's was fairly quick. So for me, it was just lots of bits of information, and then I went down the stupid road of believing conspiracy theories and 9/11 inside job and fucking Alex Jones bullshit. And then, and then you just sort of get above that and go, oh shit, all of it's fucked. And so then you totally remove your God glasses. I mean, and I suppose the level of filter that you have depends on your upbringing and how religious your parents were. That's the only way that I can properly describe it. I'm not sure if Bryce and Ed would agree.
I would just say if you want to see it in action, if you want to see Mormon cognitive dissonance come into play in the most tragic video on all of the YouTubes, there's a video titled How Heavy Were the Gold Plates, and it's posted by Eric Johnson. It's 14 and a half minutes, and I really recommend it, because what this guy does is he goes to what they call the Mormon Miracle Pageant, which is a pageant that's held at various places throughout the United States every year, and it basically tells the Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon story. And what this guy, it's just a huge gathering of Mormons. Almost strictly Mormons just go to the pageant, and it's good. It's a Broadway play basically of pro Mormon side. But what this guy does is he takes a set of plates that are, I think he made them out of copper or lead, that were the exact dimensions that were described by Joseph Smith and the witnesses of the plates. And the set of plates that he makes are like 110 pounds or something. But the problem with it is, if the plates were actually gold is much more dense and much more soft of a metal. The plates in the proper dimension, even including air gaps, would have been about 210 to 240 pounds. So this guy just rolls these plates around that he made in a red cart around the Mormon miracle pageant and talks to Mormons and tries to get them to lift the plates. And these Mormons are too scared of being shown something that conflicts with their perspective of reality. He is incapable of even getting a single Mormon there to try and lift the plates. Because the question is, if the plates were actually made out of gold, were they 210 pounds, or were, okay, so the story goes with Joseph Smith, when he got them out, and when he dug them out of the ground, he ran through the woods for 3 miles with them under his arm, and he fended off attackers that were trying to steal the gold plates from him. So, was Joseph Smith superpowered? Did he have super strength, like Thor super strength, right? Or were the plates just magically lightened by God? What exactly happened? But then there's also the witnesses, the 11 witnesses that say that they hefted the plates. Were those guys superhuman because they were able to lift 210-pound plates? I mean, the problem is there's so much cognitive dissonance when that comes into play. So if you really want to see the effect of indoctrination, look up that YouTube video, How Heavy Were the Golden Plates by Eric Johnson, and you will see that cognitive dissonance play into their head, and you'll just see them retreat further and further away, truly scared of learning something they don't want to learn. It's horrifying.
I'm just going to put a little twist on it too, from Son and Bryce. My biggest issue when I was Mormon, not to look at non-Mormon texts or to research anything, was if I was wrong, then I would lose that perspective of one day I will meet my dad. And when you have that goal in mind, that this is what you're doing this for, that one day you're going to be able to see your father and communicate with him, and someone is trying to tell you this is all bullshit, then you put earmuffs on and block them out, because you don't want to jeopardize whatever you're doing, because that's the goal is what you're going for. And if you stray off the road, as they say in Mormonism, stray off the straight and narrow path, then you don't get that reward at the end of the day. And there was a time when I would never look off that road. I was gung ho. And you could have shown me anything in the world that could have refuted anything that I was taught, but it would not have I would not have listened to you. I would have kept on to the path that they had set out, and that's where I would have went.
Wow. Yeah, I guess I just don't understand it because I've never been indoctrinated.
And I think that's why it's so hard for Ed or I to describe it, just because there's no way to describe it. It's just so much fear of the unknown, right? I mean, it's so horrible to think of the possibility that I might be wrong about my eternity and about my family and about everything that my community is and about everything everybody around me believes in. There's just no possible way that it's wrong. And anything that goes to disprove that, it's just so painful to think about it. It's just a mental block, right? And it's so hard to describe unless you've actually gone through it and you understand it from an insider's perspective.
I've listened to your podcast. It's a great show. It's very well researched, very in depth. Needless to say.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Who's your target audience for the podcast? And part 2 of the question, have you received any reaction from current LDS practitioners, and what kind of feedback have you received regarding that podcast?
Well, both very good questions, and I'll answer first by saying I don't know, and second by saying I don't really know. So to answer your first question, my target audience, I kind of started making it for the atheist community. So you know how, like, scathing atheists, they say, we're just preaching to the choir. Same with, like, cognitive dissonance, where, they just be loud and abrasive, and they're preaching to the choir about stuff that they know for a fact is bullshit, and they're just ranting about it. And that's kind of what I started this out as. It's like, I'm talking about stuff that a lot of people know about, and we should all just be angry about it because there's so many other places to get this information. Well, the deeper I got into it, the more I realized that this information really isn't available in one quick format, like in a podcast anywhere else. You have to dig through volumes and volumes of books in order to understand a lot of the stuff that I'm piecing together in the podcast. So I'm primarily making it for an ex-Mormon community that wants to learn about what they believed in, but also making it as accessible as possible to anybody that doesn't know dick about Mormonism. They're just completely ignorant about everything Mormonism, and they want to learn it from an ex-Mormon atheist perspective. So, the target audience has kind of shifted and grown as I've, as more people have started listening to it. And, the long and short of it is, I don't really know who it's for. It's for anybody that is willing to give it a listen, basically. And, remind me your second question again?
I was wondering if you've received any reaction from current LDS practitioners and what kind of feedback.
Actually, interestingly enough, I've had one person that was that called himself a true believing Mormon that emailed in, and he said that he was willing to come onto the show and have a debate or a discussion. So there are actually a couple of episodes you can look on there. They're just titled TBM for True Believing Mormon episodes, where I just have a discussion with a TBM. There's been two different guys on that have been able to debate and discuss Mormonism. But as far as listeners that are believing members of the show, I have a very hard time understanding what they think about it because I've had so very little feedback from actual believers. I mean, the only way that I got the first guy onto the show, the first believing Mormon, was in passing. I said at the end of the show, one of my shows, I was like, I don't think any believing Mormons actually listen to this. And he sent in an email a few days later and was like, hey, I'm a believer and I listened to the show and, hey, I like what you do. I just don't like how it's presented, basically. But as, other than him, I've had almost no believing Mormons write in and talk about it. It's all just been people that have already left the church so far, or people that have never been a member of the church. So I don't know how people that are believers are taking it. I would love to know, though.
It definitely would be an interesting, some interesting data to have.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And I've had Mormons are really turned off by swear words, but I like to rant. I like to get mad sometimes when a topic just deserves that extra punch, or, because you just can't properly convey deeply held anger and frustration without using a fuck or two, right? So I've had people that say, you should censor yourself, or you should bleep the episodes, or you should do something to make it so it's more palatable for believing Mormons. And, I've toyed around with the idea, and I think I might be moving forward with a project on that, but that's, much further down the road.
Because I don't want this... right? And that's my take on it. That's been my take on it.
Listen,
exactly.
Okay, swearing is bad. Hating gays is good. Fuck off. You know what I mean?
Right?
Yeah, no, I totally get you. That's the thing. That's the attitude I've had with it for a year and a half now that I've been doing it. And this has been the one point of consistent feedback where people say that I'm fucking up. And it's like, after this many people have said that this is a good change that you could do, or, just a small way to augment the show, it's like, if it's going to make it so believing Mormons can actually listen, or little kids that are believing Mormons can listen and not be offended by one little damn shit or hell, then maybe it's worth it for them to hear that information more than it is just for me to get out a fuck occasionally. You know what I'm saying?
But what if it doesn't, and then you change who you are?
No, that's not at all, because the episodes would still be available in their, abrasive format. There would just be clean versions of all of them that are bleeped out over all the cuss words. I'm not changing any. It would just be edited.
Yeah.
I mean, music videos do that all the time. I love watching music videos, and they bleep shit all the time, and it pisses me off. But they have to do it, right? Just so everybody can be a listening audience.
I didn't think you meant, bleeping it out. I thought you were just going to kind of...
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Okay. Yeah,
totally.
I
thought you were just gonna record a clean show. That's why I was like, "Fuck that."
Yeah, because I think if you're thinking about it too much, that takes away from it. Because Bobby C will definitely tell you, every time I've been anywhere near their show, the first thing I say is "fuck you, Jeremiah." So it's always just "fuck" right off the bat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and and there's something to be said about being able to rant, right? It feels so fucking good to actually just unload on something. Like, The last episode that came out, I'm not sure when this episode's coming out here, but the last episode I talked about the Orlando shooting, right? And it's a very heartfelt and a very painful issue that has, a lot of deep personal meaning to a lot of people. And there's no way that I could have gotten through that 10-minute rant without saying a couple of what the fuck is going on in these people's minds, right? Like, you have to get that across somehow, and there's just simply no way of doing it without adding in a little bit of extra feeling and desire. So, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to change the way that I record episodes. I have a couple of clean-cut episodes just for that reason, that take on one big Mormon topic. But having the beeps there might help in the long run. That's all I'm saying.
Bryce, save some of that indignation for our next segment.
Okay. Looking forward to that.
Lawsuit has been leveled against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, alleging sexual abuse of Native American children.
This is the third lawsuit to be filed against the church, Fox 13's Ben Winslow reports.
This lawsuit, filed in Navajo Nation Tribal Court, brings the total number of alleged sex abuse victims to 4. Lawyers for those people say there are more.
Quite frankly, if the program, while no doubt well-intentioned, would have to be considered a pedophile's dream.
A man identified as LK is the latest to sue the LDS Church over sexual abuse he claims he experienced while in the church's Lamanite placement program back in the 1970s. The program took children from the Navajo reservation, baptized them into the Mormon faith, and put them with foster homes in Utah, Arizona, and Idaho. LK claims in this lawsuit he was sexually abused by his foster father in the program, and he reported it to a church caseworker,
who tragically told him, well, the school year's almost over. Just tough it out for a while longer.
LK claims the church did not report the abuse to police. LK did not want to be recorded, but told Fox 13 he's bringing the lawsuit now because, quote, this can't be swept under the rug. LK is the 4th person to claim sexual abuse in the church's program. These people, in pictures provided by their lawyers, also claimed they were abused in the 1960s and 70s. Church ended the program in 1985.
We've identified more than that, but I don't know if we're going to file lawsuits on behalf of them yet.
The LDS Church says it has toughened its policies on abuse. In a statement to Fox 13, it says it has zero tolerance for abuse of any kind and works actively to prevent abuse. We have not seen the lawsuit and therefore cannot comment on any specifics. The church will examine the allegations and respond appropriately. The church is fighting to keep the lawsuits out of Navajo Tribal Court, arguing Utah is the proper forum where the alleged abuse took place.
Because of the statute of limitations in Utah, if we would file it, it would be thrown out of court before the ink even got dry. Because, we just cannot maintain a case here in Utah under the existing statute of limitations.
Now expect a fight over where this lawsuit will ultimately be heard. A federal judge here in Salt Lake City is expected to schedule a hearing on the LDS Church's request for a restraining order. That'll happen later this year. At Temple Square, Ben Winslow, Fox 13 News, Utah.
So my first reaction to that is that 4 out of the Lamanite program is scratching the surface. I'd say if you went through that whole program, that it was rampant, as it was in the rest of the church's history. I think that because Mormons have this self-governance type of setup, that this child abuse has been pushed under the rug for years and years and years. It has not seen the light of day like it has in the Catholic Church at all.
And I think it perfectly encapsulated it when they said we want it to remain in the Utah courts instead of in the Navajo tribunals, because A, that would run out the statute of limitations and it would just be thrown out of court. And they didn't say this. B, because the vast majority of the judges that would hear any of these cases are Mormons, and they would never, ever, ever overturn or, pass some sort of judgment that is detrimental to one of the, the general authorities or one of the people that knew about this going on and didn't do something. It's
but
a
aren't
self-policing
Lamanites
bullshit.
The direct descendants of Jesus, so wouldn't that make them higher than?
No, they're not direct descendants of Jesus. They're Israelites. They came from Israel 600 BC. They're descendants from them. That's according to Mormon lore. But
Would that make them closer to Jesus?
no, that was
No.
before Jesus came around.
Can I ask a
are,
silly question? Navajo tribe, is that a Canadian or a US
U.S.
native? US. So this is
US.
in the US, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And which state would that be in? Because obviously Utah so which is the alternative state that they would hear the tribunal?
I think Navajos are in Arizona. Am I wrong about that?
Yes, but
I think they're, yeah, exactly. They're southern plains states and, southern rocky states down there, in Arizona, a Texas area like that.
And what's the program that you were referring to that the LDS Church had? What's that program?
basically what they did in the 1960s up to 1985 was remove Native children from their homes, and put them into foster homes in Utah, and also Idaho, and I forget the other state, but there was three in Mormon households. They would take the children from Aboriginal groups and put them into Mormon families and baptize them. And
they must have found them pretty damn important to do that.
Well,
Did the
it's kind
state allow that? I'm sorry, being from down under, just bear with me. So you're saying that those three states allowed the Mormons to go into native reservations and basically pick children up and take them out. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, well, I mean, in the 1960s in the United States and in Canada, unfortunately, Aboriginal people were not seen as human. And unfortunately, a lot of ill treatment and crap was done to Native Americans, against their will, and they had no say. They were seen as...
And the state sanctioned it, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Son's from
what's even
Australia.
more-
She knows all about that.
I do. They used to do that. No, they used to do that to the Aboriginals, but it wasn't church-led. It was state-led. It was not like I can't understand how a church just was able to.
Like in Canada, in Canada, what they did was the government set up the programs and they paid for the Catholic school board, like the Catholic native boarding schools, which were just basically torture chambers for the natives. But it's like our government paid for them, and then the government would go and grab the kids and send them to these places. It wasn't like what I'm kind of thinking is that maybe the church went and talked to the parents of these kids, because I don't like it would have to be the state that went in and then grabbed the kids and said, here, go with these Mormon people. Like the Mormons wouldn't just be allowed to do that, Edward.
No.
Well, I don't know about that, because from what I can find on this, I've only heard about it in passing before from Spencer W. Kimball, but it was changed. Apparently, it was considered a student placement program, and I'm not sure when they went from calling it the Lamanite placement program to the Indian student placement program. I think it was done a little more on the up and up. It wasn't like just Mormons, showing up in black vans in the middle of the night and just sweeping these children away. It was done as like this exchange student kind of program where, we can come and, culturalize these kids that are needing to learn about Christianity and learn about Mormonism, learn about, Americaism, basically. And I think that was kind of the guise that they were working under the whole time.
And so they probably convinced some Native parents to give up their kids, and the Native parents did and sent the kids, and this is what you got for it.
But there are some, it's not that more, like Bryce said, it wasn't a Mormon cloak and dagger type thing. It was these, many of these children came from broken homes. And so this would probably be wards of the state would be the first choice. People that, children that were removed by social services.
Substance abuse as well, I would imagine. Yeah.
Right. And these were these are young kids that were taken from their parents and put into these programs. So the program is antiquated now. It was antiquated when it closed in 1985, but the rampant abuse, because it was done in the guise of trying to Christianize the Native Americans, in some respects, they were rife for abuse because there was no checks and balances. I can see.
I was going to say, I'm not sure if you're all familiar, but post the stolen generation, which is what Australians refer to as Aboriginal children being stolen from their parents, and post the inquiry into the Catholic Church-led orphanages with abuses that were held there as well, there's been a massive royal commission in Australia about child sexual abuse, and every single religion and every community program in Australia that touches children in some form or another, schools, scouts, sporting clubs and religions, have had to come before the commission to provide evidence about how they deal with child sex abuse, and the Commission has also taken thousands and thousands of statements from victims who have been abused. And the LDS Church, like the Adventist Church, like all the churches in Australia, have had to stand before the Royal Commission, and the findings are about to come out, and then the prosecutions will follow after that. Does that seem like something that could possibly happen in Canada as well as in the US, or no?
The United States context, I don't see it as prevalent. I don't think there is any venue for what we would call a Royal Commission. But I could be wrong. I don't see it. I haven't seen it. Aboriginal issues in the United States is more complex than it is here in Canada.
So we had a big investigation about what went on in the native boarding schools, and basically the Canadian government was taken to court over it, and they lost, and so they had to pay out a lot of money to the survivors and the survivors, or the deceased direct family members. So we've already admitted to what's happened and all the sexual abuse that went on there, and physical abuse and torture and starvation and stuff like that. We have a pretty extensive, I'm looking for the right word. It starts with an R. Anyways, we have a pretty extensive program that we pay the natives in Canada more than any other, and more than New Zealand, more than Australia, more than the United States. They get free university. We give their bands money that is supposed to go to each of the native people every month. If they live on a reserve that has oil, they get checks from that. So, and with the new Trudeau government, there's been more apologies made and more admittance done for the fact that, we came here and pretty much wiped them out.
Well, I mean, you're talking about reconciliation.
Reconciliation. Yeah.
There are major obstacles to the reconciliation process, as I see it. But it's going to go off topic a bit. But anyway, the issue at hand is Mormonism and sexual abuse. But in Canada, the government has stepped up to the plate tremendously in its part in Aboriginal abuse. But when you look at it when it comes to the religious groups, like the Catholics in particular in Canada, they haven't ponied up any of the money. Some of the people have actually declared bankruptcy, like the Christian Brothers, for instance. They have declared bankruptcy, so they're not giving any money to the victims. And it's bullshit like that that's happening. And I think that would happen under the rubric of Mormonism. I don't think that they would even, they wouldn't step up to the plate either.
Why is it that the institutions that claim to protect children, so the Mormon Church, if you look at any fucking advertising from them, it's this smiling blonde family with children, and, it's all about the children, and yet it's the same organizations that are raping children. And I just think to myself, why is that a undercurrent of that culture? I can't understand it.
It's the ease of access.
Well, and I have to ask one more question beyond that. It's like you're talking about the Canadian government has actually gone through these restitution and these reconciliation efforts with the Aborigines of Canada. That's a government, right? That's a government that should be it's created by the people for the people to help the people, and they've been able to say, yeah, we fucked up. Here's what we can do to try and, hopefully repay some of the wrongs that we've done. But now we're talking about a church, a fucking church that is made only for, the claim of a church is just to be an overall benefit to society. That's why we give them tax exemptions, because they're supposed to be nothing but a good for society. And they are the ones that can't own up to the shit that's in their closet. And they can't say, we're sorry that we raped little Indian children. They can't even admit that it happened. And you're so right when you say, like, it's these institutions that are created to, like, help people and help children. Why is it that they're always the ones that are fucking them? Like, a Christopher Hitchens quote comes to mind perfectly. I'm going to paraphrase it to the best of my extent, but he said, I never liked being called part of a flock, because a shepherd doesn't herd the sheep just because he likes them. He does it because he wants to fleece them, eat them, or fuck them. And that's all the church does. That's why we're sheep of the church, is because they want to use us, they want to abuse us, and they want to fuck us, especially if we're little kids with tight buttholes.
Well said, young man.
I totally agree with you, Bryce. And it seems to me that the stricter the religion is in regards to sexual purity, I say that in inverted commas, the more the fucking child raping there is. It just blows my mind.
And we let them get away. Like, we don't do anything about it. Like, according to what I'm able to find on the internet, the church's Indian placement program, the last student graduated that in the year 2000. 2000, this fucking millennium, and the program itself was never fully disbanded. They had never actually officially removed the program whatsoever. That was basically an inherent child fucking ring. What? They can't even distance themselves from the program that they used to have. They're just sweeping the fact that they had the program under the rug. Are you shitting me? Like, can I read a quote from one of the prophets of the church real quick here? This is from Spencer W. Kimball. This was the guy that was the prophet of the church during when they lifted the priesthood ban, and this is what he was talking about with the Lamanite placement program. He said, at one meeting, a father and mother and their 16-year-old daughter were present. The little member girl, 16, sitting between their dark father and mother, and it was evident she was several shades lighter than her parents on the same reservation, in the same hogan, subject to the same wind and weather. Beyond that, he says, there was a doctor in Utah City who for 2 years had an Indian boy in his home who stated that he was some shades lighter than the younger brother just coming into the program from the reservation. So that's what it was. The last line in this quote says, these young members of the church are changing to whiteness and delightsomeness. That was the entire motivation behind this Indian placement program, was to make them white and delightsome. And this dude gave this quote in 1960. This is mind-blowing. Like, this isn't 150 years ago. This is fucking 55 years ago that we're talking about this shit, when, like, segregation and civil rights were at their height. That's when he was talking about Indian boys that were changing colors because they were becoming more righteous in the church. It's fucking insanity.
Or they were the product of white people taking advantage of Native Americans and raping and pillaging them. There's also that possibility. My question is, do you think at the high level of Mormonism that sorry to sound conspiratorial, that they are fully aware of this? Or do you think they too are completely deluded?
No, I think they totally know that sexual abuse has gone on, not just in Native communities, but in churches worldwide. And they cover it up. Mormons like to keep stuff in-house. They don't like going to authorities that they can't control. So they want to keep this in house. By no means will they go to the police. I'll give a for instance. I had a rough childhood growing up, and there was abuse in my home. The police were never called. There was no social worker that came to my house. There was no give from the church. There was no support for me. They actually brought my parents in to a meeting with the branch president and explained to me that that I was in wrong for even talking about it. So this is the type of mentality that we're dealing with, right?
I'm absolutely speechless. See, the LDS Church isn't going to get away with it in Australia because this latest Royal Commission was put together by Julia Gillard, who was our previous Prime Minister only 3 years ago. But anyway, she put together this Royal Commission, and every institute, I know my mother rang me after the Seventh-day Adventist Church got hauled before, and she was very proud that there was only 17 cases as opposed to hundreds from other churches. And I said to my mum, are you insane? I believe one is too much. So don't give me 17, give me none. This is what I expect from people when it comes to children.
Right? Let's just go to the source. Let's blame Jesus. Suffer all the children so I can come in them. I mean, it's like every religion has it. There's just no escape from it. It's fucking insane. These are religions. They're supposed to help us. They're supposed to help society. That's what they exist for. And all they do is fuck children. Ugh! I'm ripping my hair out right now.
But what really frustrates me about this, Bryce, is that, as you know, Mormons believe they have a prophet, someone who speaks with God. So if that person is not getting revelation, telling him about what's going on behind the scenes, because God is supposed to know everything, he's supposed to see everything. If he's not getting information about this guy who's a pedophile and doing something about it, then it just shows how either God is impotent, the prophet is stupid, or it's all bullshit. And I think either of all three of them doesn't make the church look any better.
Well said. Very well said.
I have a question for you guys. Mormon porn, and go.
MormonBoys.com.
MormonGirls.com.
There's Mormon porn.
That's all I got.
Okay. Well, Edward doesn't know because he's a prude. You're a prude, but Bryce, you know about Mormon porn?
Yeah, and it's they actually run they run parallel with a website called mormonssecret.com, where you can actually go online and buy garments and make your own Mormon fetish porn if you want. And they're very open about the point of the Mormon Secret website of selling those legitimate Mormon garments online. They say it's to fulfill all of your fantasy needs, or to take care of those weird Mormon kinks that you might have. So,
I mean, all three of those are great websites. Please do check them out. Yeah, listeners, check them out. You won't regret it, I promise.
We can only have sex in the missionary position. What kink is there? Having the lights on, is that the kink?
Taking off your Mormon undergarments.
Jeez Louise, I mean, seriously, it's just ridiculous.
Wearing a big, granny bra on top of the garments, that's pretty sexy stuff right there. I'm just saying. Well, that doesn't get anybody else going?
Okay. For fashion.
Come on, I can't be the weird one here.
Oh, it's hilarious. Because you know what? I can picture this shit. Because
I'm way weirder than you, so don't worry about it. You can.
Well,
okay. Whew. All right.
The stats in Utah specifically is that Utah consumes the most porn in all of the United States and has a very high rate of gay porn in the United States.
It's the highest in gay porn as well, son.
Excellent. So you tell me, what's the percentage of Mormonisms in Utah? What's the percentage of the Mormon population in Utah?
In Salt Lake City itself, the hub of Salt Lake City, it's like 40 or 50%. The further you go out from there, it gets as high as 98%.
There you go. So I'm just, it's all bullshit. And the biggest solution to child fucking, to not commit child fucking, is to not be prudish and teach people and be in their bedrooms and shame people for their sexual wants and desires, and to not shame gay people and transgender people and bisexual people. And I guarantee you the incidence of child raping somehow significantly decreases in that situation.
Oh shit, there's so many other more depressing statistics. I mean, you just picked up on the porn statistics, which are, can be a little deceptive, but if you look at the more fucked up statistics of teen suicide rates are, I think Utah is the second highest in the nation, second to Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. And if you look at the LGBT teen suicides, Utah's number one for those because gays are so hated in Utah. And you have to wonder where all of that shit comes from. And then, like, I shared this on the Facebook page recently. There's this article that was in the Salt Lake Tribune, which is the not church-owned website or news agency in Salt Lake. And they reported on the crusade that the Mormon Church is going on in Mexico against gay rights there. They lost the fight in America, so now they're taking it to Mexican soil because they're just fighting basically a proxy war against homosexuality there. So you wonder where the fuck this comes from and how the statistics could possibly be the highest of LGBT suicides in Utah. It's like, maybe there's some fucking correlation here. Maybe there's something that we should talk about. Maybe there's a common theme running between these two things.
Well, the most significant fact that statistic that I think is relevant to what we're talking about is they're number 5 in the entire United States for child sexual assault cases, 5th in the United States, and Utah has a smaller population than say California. I'm pretty sure it's smaller population than New York State, and they're 5th in the country for sexual assault. So I personally think that if no one's drawn the correlation between religion and pedophilia, by now, I think people should start waking up. Okay, guys, our next topic is Mormonism and the LGBT rights in the United States.
Preface it by saying, fuck the church. That's it. They've overstepped their boundaries too many times, and fuck them. So, yeah.
For what I know about the Mormon Church and their funding of Prop 8 and stuff like that, it's like, I always hear people say that Mormons are the nicest people on the face of the planet, but you can't be bigoted towards gays and be nice in my mind. Like, it's just like the two of them don't match. And I don't care. People say, oh, it's because they're indoctrinated in the church. It's not an excuse in my book. It's the same as saying, I was drunk. I didn't mean to rape her, in my mind.
Well, I mean, they not only do they fund Prop 8, Dave, they went out and basically put out a manual on how to excommunicate homosexuals from the church. I mean, they also say, oh, we love the sinner, but we hate the sin. But it's, if you are homosexual and don't act upon it for the rest of your entire existence, you're perfectly fine with us. Just that your kids can't, become members of the church. And
I think that's where the hold up point was too with so many people, because they hadn't okay, the thing is, the church hadn't taken a strong stance on this yet, so that's why people were so surprised, because they were still working on kind of like a love the sinner, hate the sin type of thing, but they hadn't said that members that have, or, people that are gay, their kids can't join the church. They hadn't taken that strong of a stance until this was, this topic blew up. And that's when people got really fucking pissed off about it. And luckily what that did was, it forced a march on Temple Square. I mean, 1,000 people, just over 1,000 people all gathered together and marched on Temple Square in Salt Lake City and said, we are resigning from the church because of your stances on gay rights. So it was this amazing movement, this unprecedented thing that had never happened in all of Mormon history, this mass exodus of members that were boycotting them because of their antiquated views on gay rights. And it was beautiful. No, it didn't. Absolutely not. But it was great that there was no way that the Mormon Church could say it's not a problem anymore, because that many people showing up and saying "fuck you, church," that's like a canary in the coal mine. If they keep ignoring this, I mean, the canary's already dead. If they keep ignoring it, it's only going to mean more problems for them.
That's the way I see it anyway.
And it should.
Right. Yeah. Right. As well it should. Like this, they're still living in the 1950s here. They're still living way too. They're living in the past because they're led by a whole, nothing but racist, bigoted, white assholes. That's it. And we obviously see that their policies are completely reflective of what these bigoted assholes want to do. And then they go up on the podium at General Conference or at Firesides or at BYU Devotional, and they say, well, people can call us bigoted, but we're just fighting for the religious freedom of this church. No, you're being bigoted and saying that you're not bigoted. Just because you say it doesn't mean it's not fucking true, you bigots. And that's the best way to handle bigots, is to call them out for being bigoted, I think.
I think this, besides like church history that is coming to light that they try to withhold from people, I think this issue alone is one of the biggest impetuses for people to leave the church. I would never have thought that in my entire life, because you would see in young men's groups, they would tell you about homosexuality is wrong, it's against God, blah, blah, blah. And you saw the hole that the church had. But when you saw, as you said, the thousands of people that marched on Temple Square, that to me showed that cognitive dissonance that a lot of Mormons have is starting to crack.
Well, it's what David said a few weeks ago, actually. It's because we know more and more gay people. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's more socially accepted today than it ever has been.
Well, you can't hate someone you actually like. And that's the reality of life, is that more and more gay people are out, more and more gay people are viewed positively in society, and more of them are your neighbours, your friends, and so you can't hate these people because you know them.
Yeah, I agree with that, but it can make some church people very uncomfortable, especially if they have gay tendencies themselves and they're trying to hide that. They may hate themselves being gay and in turn hate gays because they're gay.
Now, Bryce, you said that you had a story when we first started off the show about this issue. Can you share it with us?
Yeah, that was, I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier during the last segment, but you can just do a quick Google search and, like LDS fighting gay marriage, and it's all over right now. It finally has gained a little bit of traction, but basically it's in, Salt Lake Tribune and Religion News and LA Times and Instinct Magazine, Huffington Post. I mean, it's all over. The church is, bleeding members over their gay marriage issues, their hard stance on gay rights, and they are moving the fight to Mexico because they lost the fight in America. Simple as that. They lost the fight here. So now they are lobbying the church members in Mexico and the church leadership there.
But they lost that shit too already.
Well, apparently not. So it says here, Mexico is home to about 1.4 million Mormons. I mean, that's according to the LDS statistics.
But gay marriage has been legalized in Mexico.
I don't think they give a shit. I mean, it's been legalized here, but they're still taking some hard stances against it now. I mean, it's a matter of wherever they can gain an audience that will listen to this shit, they will do it. God, I'm trying to find the quote from this guy.
Yeah, fuck those cunts.
Right. And that's why I said, why I prefaced this segment by saying, fuck the church. You lost already. Just deal with your fucking loss. Take it and lick your wounds and leave the public discourse against gay marriage. You don't have a place here in the public sphere anymore. But the thing is, they have, in the, correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, but I think in the 1990s, they released this thing called the Family Proclamation to the World. Is that right?
Yeah. The Family Proclamation was in the 90s, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to tell a little more about that? Because I was just a wee little chap at that time. Wasn't abreast of the political pressures that were going on at the time.
Well, basically the proclamation was the church's stance on how families the family was the central key component of society. And if we didn't have a mom and a dad, and, together in the church, basically, that our society would collapse. Basically, the Republican Party's speech or platform. It's what Mitt Romney spoke every time he got out. But it's a family proclamation is just that. It's a standard that mom and dad are the central people in the home and they have to be together. So it was not only combating divorce rates, but it was also combating LGBT rights explicitly. But it's more evident today than it would have been when it was first released. I hope that cleared up.
Yeah. And that's what they cite every time. So, like, we have just in this news article from religionnews.com, it says a quote from a church letter. It says, "The family is ordained of God, and marriage between man and woman is essential to his eternal plan." And then you have this guy, Benjamin de Hoyos, who was, he's a Mexican area authority. And he said, our point is to promote those measures designed to strengthen the family and to maintain it as the fundamental unit of society, right? Just, it's this bullshit fear that, somehow if somebody has two dads or two moms, they're just going to grow up to be like a fucking serial killer or something. And there's absolutely no data to support that. There's absolutely no data that shows us that somebody that grows up in a homosexual family has any problems or any sort of different upbringing than somebody that grows up in a family with a man and a woman at the head of it. In fact, I would argue, and I'm sure there are statistics to back this up because you can make statistics say a lot of things, but I would argue that obviously that families that have, two dads or two moms at the head of the family, they're probably more prepared to be parents than a lot of people that are, a mother and a father, right? I mean, how many people do we all know that got married because they had a kid, right? But, gay people don't get married because there's a kid involved. They usually get married and then, they are partners for a long time and they decide that they want to raise a kid and they get prepared to do it. Inherently, that's going to make them raise a child up in a more stable and a better household than, two parents that don't have the money or the means to raise a child that get married just because there's a baby in the mix. So it's this bullshit homophobia and fear of anything that is, sexually outside of the normal perspective of what Mormons say is what the normal, sexual norms are. And it's absurd. It's absolutely infuriating that they can't understand what they are doing. And they're just going to where they think they can take the fight somewhere that they might be able to win it. And it's a bullshit.
The problem is for them is that the structure of the family unit is changing significantly. So taking out or excluding equal marriage for the LGBT community, I'm talking about even more basic structure. Women are getting married less and later. Men and women are getting married later. More and more couples are choosing to remain childless. So the entire structure of the family is no longer leave it to Beaver circle of fantasy that they live in. It's just not, that is not the case anymore.
Right. And the Mormon family with 18 kids that you saw in every Utah street corner, that's becoming more and more a thing of the past. And I say, good. There's already 7 billion of us here. We're already overpopulating the planet. Yeah, let's give it a fucking rest for a little while. Replacement value. I might have 1 kid or 2 kids. Replacement value for myself and my significant other. That's it. I'm not going to go have 18 kids just to get tax write-offs for that shit. Like, the Queer for Full movement is alive and well in Mormon culture, and they see it dying off. It's, it's exactly what you're saying. You're exactly right.
Just to go back to the family proclamation, I just Googled it real quick, and the first 4 paragraphs are astounding. But I'm going to read you the essential idea of why what Mormons believe, and see what you can gain from this little paragraph. All human beings, male and female, one created in the image of God, each is a beloved spirit son or daughter of a heavenly parent. And as such, each is a divine nature, and gender is an essential characteristic of individual, pre-mortal, mortal, and an eternal identity and purpose. And that was done in 1997. Gender is an essential characteristic of the individual in the pre-mortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose. They rule out the fact that gender it can be anything other than what God created it.
So what happens to hermaphrodite?
So those are just a conspiracy of anti-Mormons that hermaphrodites aren't real things. Just like gay people aren't real things. They just have same-sex attractions.
There are absolutely medical cases and significant amounts of people who are born with both sex organs. And the horrible, sad part about that is that up until a few years ago, parents used to decide for the child, at birth, more or less, and it's just, I can't get my head around it, because their perfect God has created a baby with male and female genitalia.
See, there you're talking about those damn fact things that get in the way of everything, right?
Yeah, I've always kind of had that question in my mind. What do religions say about hermaphrodites? Like, what do the ultra religious people say about them? Because they have a real problems with trans people, and they think that God created two sexes and they're absolutely perfect in that way. But there's hermaphrodites, and sometimes hermaphrodites are feminine, and sometimes hermaphrodites are masculine, but they always have both sexual organs. It'd be interesting to find out what.
There's also medical conditions where it's part sexual organs, so one full and possible part. And there's situations and medical conditions where you have an extra X or Y chromosome. So their ideology about it being black and white, male and female, is completely medically not capable of occurring all the time.
It's like the same problem or the same question that people have had for a long time. Well, is homosexuality, is there a gay gene, right? Is there something in your DNA that makes you gay or makes you a lesbian or makes you... Yeah, of course there is. People are born masculine or feminine, towards masculine or feminine tendencies, but those things, it's a combination of nature and nurture. People are a product of their society, but they're also a product of their DNA and their chemical biology that is contained inside their own body. And there's something that is obviously making people identify as one sexual preference or one gender preference. And who does a religion like the Mormon Church think they are in determining that one is right, one is wrong? We haven't given them that authority. They're taking that authority for themselves and trying to, instill it on the entire world when the rest of the world is like, you don't get to do that. You have the authority over your members, but not the entire fucking world, because you're not the world. You're not the one true ultimate mega church over the entire world as much as you try to be. And I think that's where so much of the fight comes from, and why so many people are opposed to the church in so many ways for their stances that they're taking on gay rights. Because people that are secular individuals that want to keep church and state separate will say, you don't get to make those decisions. You are a church. You have no spot in the political sphere. And I think that's something that they cannot get through their heads, because it's an organization run by a bunch of bigoted, old, white, miserable people.
Is there any insight you can give on the state of mind of some of these LGBT people who are LDS but still choose to want to make right with the church, try to campaign for doctrinal reforms? Or in the article in our rundown, I was reading that these, a lot of couples, LGBT people raising children who've received the news of that recent, pronouncement about excommunication. Like, what is a mindset for someone whose church clearly doesn't want them? I think it's safe to say. Like, what's the incentive for them to stay? I don't understand why people still stay in a church that doesn't want them.
That's a tough one. Like, I ask myself that question all the time, right? Like, how can somebody that the church obviously hates still be a member? Like, well, I mean, let me throw the question back at you, David. What do you think would cause somebody that, so the church oftentimes says that, nobody's born gay, they just have same-sex attraction, and that's how they get around it. So, I mean, if a person, a person that's a believing member of the church, what do you think that their motivations are to try and square the circle or to try and stay in the church, even though the church doesn't really want them?
I guess it would be what weighs more, the sense of community that the church provides versus being able to live openly, to have a family and to raise your children, in a fully functioning family unit where you're accepted by your community. So I'm thinking it's probably the community thing. But again, part two of that question is, why is there such a barrier for them to find new community? Because new community is out there, right? But they still want to. A select amount of these people who want to change and reform a church and want to stick with it. I guess they don't see that there's alternative communities out there that are fully supportive. There's different religions out there that will fully welcome them, with open arms. It's just, they're stuck.
So I've got a bit of insight on that specifically, David. It's not necessarily LGBT related, but I'm on Facebook. I'm part of a couple of SDA or Seventh-day Adventist groups, and one is with members and non-members. And there are a few people in that who don't believe in creationism, don't believe in bigotry, don't believe in, or do believe in separation of church and state, do believe that women should be given the same level of leadership roles as men in the church and in the world, but they choose to stay in the religion even though they question the doctrine of the religion because they want to be part of the change that comes from within that religion, to evolve that religion into a more progressive, more open-minded place of safety for people in the community in that religion. So perhaps some LGBT people in the Mormon church also wish to be part of the change that brings that along, like black people were, in the 70s.
Well, unfortunately, son, according to Mormon ideology, the biggest problem is once the prophet, quote unquote, says something, there is no discussion. There is no changing that doctrine until the next prophet comes in and he gets another revelation. The only way that the church will change its stance on LGBT issues is if the government itself issues something that if they didn't, they'd lose tax exempt status, and then boom, it'll change overnight. That's what happened in the 70s when it came to it happened like that way in the 1970s. It was much more. There was going to be privileges taken away from BYU, which they didn't want to have happen, so they changed their policy. Plus, there was a whole new temple that was built in Brazil, and no one would go to it because they were black. They couldn't go into it, so that they had to change the policy to get the tithing money to go to the temple. There was a lot. It has to do with finances. If there's something going to challenge the finances of the church, then they are willing to change their position on something. Until that happens, you're spinning your wheels against the church. So
that's actually what I was going to say earlier. Was like if the repercussion is losing the tax exempt status again, all of a sudden God will talk to them.
Pretty much, Corinne.
How many times does that have to happen before people go, Jesus, Just that God loves that money so much. He only seems to adjust when these pitiful little men decide that we're going to evolve as a society.
I mean, it's kind of retarded in some respects, because the whole concept for me, as a Mormon, was that you had a goal that you had, like I said earlier, you had a goal that you had to follow, and basically to get eternal life. There's also the societal pressures, as David was talking about, but they don't see that there is another community out there for them. They're indoctrinated so deeply about what is wrong, and this is not what you do, that the society pressures, if they see you doing something wrong, will be to turn away from you. So that means your mother, your father, your sisters, your brothers, your friends, everybody, they're gone. That's a lot of burden to put on somebody that wants to be authentic to who they are.
David, would you have eventually come out if everyone that you loved rejected you? Like, what would have been the thing that would have, because that would have been your community, would you have stayed closeted, or would you have shed that no matter what to be you?
I probably would have come out anyway, because I don't know, it's difficult to even imagine that, because I just don't live in that kind of environment where it would have, I could never see myself as staying in the closet. I could definitely see myself like ditching something ditching a religion. Even when I was a believer, like part of my deconversion process, was a big part of what was a big factor was me being, part of the LGBT community, being gay, and like the cognitive dissonance started to build and build and build, and it reached a critical mass. And especially like in the last five years, when a lot of direct hatred from religious pastors, preachers from the Catholic Church, especially, and from the Protestant Church, you really got a chance to hear that, on TV or on the radio, and just kind of made me just, I don't know, it made the cognitive dissonance very palpable, and I had no choice. Like I could not tolerate the cognitive dissonance, and I had to choose. And so I either had to choose between a God that made me gay but hates me, is going to send me to hell, or an alternative, or be happy.
And in Mormonism, that concept of hell doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I didn't look back either. Like, I mean, a confluence of events happen, and, the more and more I read and study all that, I know that, I'm pretty confident that, I chose the right thing, and hopefully other people can too, who are LGBT in really, weird religions like Mormonism or the Catholic Church. They can get past the cognitive dissonance of the whole thing, because it's very destructive.
So I was talking to Hugh about this last night, coming onto the podcast today, and I was saying that Bryce was going to be on, and we were going to be talking about Mormonism. And I said, it's a really, out of all the Christian, I say that in inverted commas because I actually don't think Mormons are Christians. Out of all the Christian denominations, Mormonism is the biggest cult, I believe. And then Hugh said to me, all religion is a cult. It's just a matter of degree. And I agree with that. But I do think the clutch that the Mormon Church has on its citizens is like one of those, Jonestown type cults. It's verging to that because they're so isolated.
In fact, son, there have been some Jonestown type scenarios that happen in Mormon culture. Not sort of like they took the Kool-Aid and died, but they were willing to slaughter people, men, women, and children, to appease their leaders. Mountain Meadows massacre, for instance, where there was just a group of people passing through Utah where they just slaughtered them.
Mm. They did it because of the blood atonement too. I think that's worth pointing out as well.
Yeah, I mean, these people are willing to give their lives for what they believe. and they're proud of doing that. That is something that they always are reinforced. No man, the scripture in the Bible where it says, Jesus says, "No greater love hath a man than he lay down his life for his friends," and that is something that's constantly reinforced. At least it was in my neck of the woods.
Well, and it's not only reinforced, but it's admired, right? If you have a bishop or a branch president, in your case, Ed, that devotes his entire life to the church, that will do, he'll drive however far necessary to go pick up, one of his flock from a party because he thinks that they might be drinking or doing something. He's seen as a very valiant man, not an asshole. And it maps up all the way to somebody that is seen as a warrior for the church, like the Danites, or somebody that was embracing the doctrine of blood atonement to justify killing somebody, like with the Mountain Meadows massacre. We're talking about degrees of commitment here. A stake president that asks a young boy or a young girl in detail about how much they masturbate and how much they touch themselves and how good it feels, he's on the same belief and commitment spectrum as somebody that is willing to go, slaughter 120 men, women, and children in Mountain Meadows, just outside of Cedar City. They're all in the same spectrum of belief there. It's just, how far are you willing to go? What are you willing to do for your church? What are you willing to subject other people to in order to prove your loyalty to the church? And I think that's a very creepy road to try and walk down, right? It's a very odd thought experiment to think, what would I do for my church? I can say unequivocally, well, churches are bullshit. But somebody that's a believer that thinks that their eternity is in the balance, whether they show their commitment or not to the church, they might be motivated to do anything. Kill somebody, malign an entire race of people or an entire subsect of the population. Who knows? All sorts of horrible, evil things can be justified when it's done in the name of a religion.
Well said. And to add to that, son, you're correct. Mormonism is a cult. It's one of the largest cults, and it is retarding the human species on a rate that is astronomically bad.
In Montreal, the Catholic Church has decided themselves that they're going to ban priests from being with children alone. Now, at first, on the surface of this, you would think, what's wrong with that? This is going to be a great thing. Until you dig a little deeper and you realize that they're doing it for selfish reasons, to protect themselves from being sued and to, in their words, keep unfounded allegations from children being levied against them, since in their words they say...
Was this not a thing already? It wasn't a law already that old men couldn't be left alone with little kids? Okay, sorry.
No.
That's just... Yeah. Wow. Okay, anyway, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. No, so, and in their words, children make shit up. So go ahead, discuss.
Oh, fuck the Catholic Church. Can I start this segment off? Like the last segment, fuck the Catholic Church.
Yes, you may.
Are we surprised, though? Are we really surprised? Like, I'm glad that they're actually passing a law that says, hey, this church that fucks all these little kids, let's make it so they can't fuck all these little kids.
Yeah, so it's not actually a law. It's not actually a law. It's just the church telling the priest not to do it.
Oh, like they always do. Okay, yes. Never mind. I thought they were actually going to do something productive for it.
No, it's fluff, and it's fluff to victim blame.
Yeah, that's exactly. Children make shit up. Yes, you've said that perfectly. That's what they're doing. That kid just came up with that story out of thin air. He saw it on TV. I never actually touched his poop hole. He actually, it's all that death metal the kid listens to. The kid's a sinner. That's why.
Or my favorite excuse, I didn't know fucking kids was wrong. Right?
Oh, yeah, that's classic, right?
I just find it so fucking irritating that even when they do something right, like banning priests being alone from children, they go ahead and fuck it up by blaming victims.
Well, because they can't take blame for themselves, right? I mean, pshaw.
Yeah. Like, this is probably the first thing they've done right in, well, I would say ever, right?
Yeah, I mean, I could probably agree with that. In recent history, anyway, yeah, that's probably one of the most amazing things that they have ever done is saying, hey, yeah, we're the data is starting to mount that our priests are fucking little kids. If those little kids weren't so damn sexy, then we wouldn't have to put this law into place. I mean, it's the wrong way to approach it, but I guess it still gets to the same correct answer.
I think it also goes to show that they've noticed that there's been a few close calls where there have been countries that are like, no, fuck you. You can't just run. You have to stand trial for the things that you've done. And they run anyways, and they don't send the priests, but it's getting worse and worse for them. There's countries that have tried priests not in presence, and there's been lots of victims that have been awarded money, and world opinion, like a developed nation opinion of the Catholic Church, has gone way down over the sexual abuse allegations. Even in my own country, where Edward lives in Newfoundland, there was huge allegations there, and it wasn't just small. It was like hundreds of boys that are now men over many, many years were systematically and violently sexually abused. I just like, when do we finally say, fuck you, you're a criminal organization, you're all standing trial? When does that happen, Bryce?
No.
Doesn't.
It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It hasn't happened. But I'm not surprised, right? Especially when it's a church that's headquartered in its own nation state, right? There's no way that you can possibly prosecute them unless you invade the Vatican, basically, right?
Well,
unless you declare the Vatican part of actual Roman territory, there's no way of actually saying, there's nobody has any legal precedent over them. So
that's a country that the Canadian military could take, though. Like we could whoop their ass, right? Like, what is the Swiss Guard going to do? The Swiss Guard, the gayest unit ever.
Well, I mean, David, like, do you remember back in like 2010 when Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins had a lawyer that was wanted to prosecute the game? I do remember that. I think that is what we need to do. I think that's the simplest option that we have, and I think. But like Bryce said, they run and they hide back to their Vatican. And see, the thing is too is that the order for the priests to be banned from being alone with the children came from Vatican and everybody's favorite Pope, even though he's no better than any other. That order came from the Vatican. And again, it's only to cover their own ass. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
And you can't really fault them for that, right? I mean, they're never ever going to openly say, we fucked up by letting all of our preachers, put it in little kids' poopers. They're never going to come out and say that. That's like the church, it's like the Mormon church coming out and openly saying, yeah, so we fucked all of those Indian kids. Yeah, sorry about that. No, they're never going to own up to it. So if this is the best concession we can get, fuck it, I'll take it. I mean, the prize may be tainted, but I'll still take it, right? It's better than nothing.
They ruined it for me. I was on board until I actually read the article and I read what the Archdiocese in Quebec said. And as soon as they said it's also to protect the church from allegations from children because we all know they make shit up. He didn't say shit, but that's basically what he said. I was on board with it until then. And then I'm like, fuck you. Get the fuck out of my country. Go back to your own fucking Vatican. You fuck each other up the ass. Never mind our children.
I think it should be Canadian law that no adult, man or woman, should be allowed in a room with a child, religious or not.
Unless it's family members, right? Like,
Yeah.
like any public servant or any teacher or doctor.
But I think at that point, it's just you're painting with too broad of a brush. It's like saying, okay, so every man has a potential that he's going to rape a woman, so therefore no man and woman that aren't married can be in the same room. Yeah, I'm just saying, like, it's painting with too broad of. I'm sorry.
But what you can't do, you can't say that because you have to be fair and balanced when you're making laws in Canada, because that's just basically the way it is. So you wouldn't be able to say only Catholic priests. You'd have to say like all non-family member men or like doctors. But what you could say is no religious. Like you couldn't single out the Catholics in general, but you could say no religious authority are allowed to be alone with children.
But I think that just exacerbates the problem even more, because then they're going to cry foul. Oh, you're making laws based on our religious affiliation only. There's got to be some atheist preachers out there, but it's never going to pass, right? It's never going to gain traction from anybody that's a member of any church ever. Which I know that the Canada has less percentage-wise than America does, but there's still a lot of Canadian people there who vote, and shit like that would never get passed. It's just not getting at the root of the problem. It's treating a symptom, right? It's like you're trying to take cough syrup for pneumonia. It's not actually going to solve any problem. You're at any point that you try and put a bottle on this, put a lid on this Pandora's box. Now that it's already out and open, it's just going to be plugging up one hole while there's a huge fucking gouge in the other side of the fucking dam, right? Why not get at the heart of it and say Catholic Church, or say, get to the heart of where other churches are, disproportionately responsible for fucking little kids, and say, you are responsible for this. Here is a civilian oversight committee that has to oversee these hearings that are done, and any time that a kid or any person brings up allegations that they were molested or that they were inappropriately treated, ranging the gamut from, stolen from all the way up to sexual molestation. If anybody brings up a complaint against any church leader for that, then they have to face trial over a civilian oversight committee. No more of this fucking shell game that they're playing with preachers where they just take one and move it to a different place. No more of the internal hearings. No more of the sweeping the shit under the rug. We have to get this shit in the open. We can't treat the symptoms. We have to put a spotlight on the problem itself. That's what I'm getting at.
I wonder if I wonder if the I think also one of the big problems is the whole nature of being a priest or being being celibate. Like, what if they allowed priests to actually get married and have families instead of?
Well, they used to. They should go back to it.
Because
I'm
it's just,
sure it would help.
It's just a recipe for trouble. And I don't think it's natural, and I think people should live. I mean, there's just so much pent up crap going on, and they take it out on the most vulnerable members of society. The easiest thing to do. The Catholic Church, most religions, they tend to moralize for some reason, which kind of pisses me off personally, is that people seem to think that priests know more about morality than a moral philosopher or someone else who's secular. Parents trust these people, thinking they look up to them for moral guidance. They don't really seek to find some kind of alternative moral guidance that has nothing to do with the church. They look up to them, and part of the power a church has is they're supposed to be perfect. They're supposed to be the moral high ground that everyone's supposed to look up to.
So basically, we're coming back full circle to David's first question, which was, why are we giving these people the power that we give them? And
yeah, exactly. And after Bryce had said what he had to say, I want to kind of piggyback on that. Like, when is one country going to just say, fuck you, you're standing trial. Like, you can't run. Like, no, I don't care. I don't care if you take that priest and send him to Argentina, just like the fucking Nazi hunters. We're going to go to Argentina and we're going to bring him back. Yeah. And he's going to fucking stand trial, and so are you cunts.
And if they don't, we can't bring them back. Do it, in absentia.
Yeah.
And trial, and as soon as that the church steps foot on our soil again, they're liable for any damages whatsoever.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, and I mean, even if they continue playing the shuffle game, I mean, that costs them money to do that. To take one priest that's been face these allegations, bring him back, and then send out another one in his place, or to move him to a different area. That takes resources, and if you have one country, one major political power, one large first world country that has many Catholic churches in it, that says every time you send a priest over to us that has allegations brought up against them of anything related to any criminal activities, anything whatsoever, they are going to face trial. Eventually, they're gonna run out of priests. Simple as that. And Catholics could take it as like a war on Catholicism. No, it's a war on child fucking. Can't you get behind that? Can't you agree with that? I mean,
no, completely. I know the one silver lining in all this is let's be honest, the Catholic Church is a dying thing.
In North America, not in Asia, not in some of the.
But in the West,
yeah, for sure.
I'm a contractor, Bryce. I do renovations, and I did some renovations over the winter at the nuns' quarters here in Ottawa, and for a place that had, I think it was like 156 beds, there was literally 6 sisters in there, and at one point apparently it was full. So at least
fucking brilliant. Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah. So at least the nuns are dying off.
Well, and they're bleeding members, right? The Catholic Church is bleeding members. So many people that call themselves Catholic are just as cultural Catholic as cultural Jews are that don't practice, right? I mean, I'm a cultural Mormon because I know and speak Mormonese, but I don't practice it. Churches everywhere are bleeding members, and the canary's already dead, and they're already, puffing fumes right now, and they don't realize it quite yet. And it's only going to take a small amount of time, I think, before they really start feeling the negative effects of that, and it starts to get to them, and it really starts to fuck with them. And it just takes their pocketbook, right? I mean, I think Ed said that earlier. It's like once you threaten their pocketbook, they're fucked. Simple as that. And that's the next thing to follow after the membership dwindles to a point that's no longer sustainable.
And let's look at the real good note in this, though, is that children are going to be safer with this policy in place.
Oh, for sure. But my fear, I shouldn't say for sure. My fear is that this is a Catholic Church policy. So who's enforcing it? The Catholic Church. And if you have systematic child abuse from the higher ups, like the bishops and the archbishops and the fathers, because we all know that even the members of Catholic Church worship the Father. I'm skeptical of them not being able to still do fucking shady shit.
Well, that's where the secular government should step in.
But it's not. It's the Catholic Church that is doing this, right? It's not the secular government.
I agree. But I think it's the cue for the secular government to stand up and say, okay, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But I mean, we talked about this earlier. It's there's no way to have a church that polices itself and have it still be intellectually honest. That's simply not a reality. I mean, it's like, hey, I've made this example before. But it's like having BP be the prosecuting body over their own oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, right? What are they going to do? Oh yeah, we totally didn't fuck up. Shit just happens. We fixed the problem. We don't see any oil on the surface anymore. So fuck it. We took care of the problem. We slapped ourselves on the wrist, and we're real sorry about it. But that's it, right? There hasn't been any actual civilian oversight. Nobody's gone to jail. They haven't paid the price for causing, billions, possibly trillions of dollars of damage to the life in the Gulf Coast and to the entire biology, for altering it literally for millions of years. They have altered the entire biology of the Gulf of Mexico for the foreseeable future. So, I mean, the same thing is going on with any big corporation or any big church. They're just not going to do anything about it until they're forced to, until something threatens their pocketbook, right?
And the one thing in the article that they did say is that this is a trial to see. I don't really think they care to stop the abuse. What I think they care about is stopping the allegations.
And at least try to hemorrhage the losses in revenue.
Yes, that as well. Fucking cunts. That has been the show for tonight. Bryce, you go ahead and pimp your shit, man.
Right on. So I'm the host of 2.5 podcasts. I got the Naked Mormonism Podcast. That's the mother show. If you want to find anything about what I do and everything that I'm about, check that out, nakedmormonismpodcast.com, iTunes, Stitcher, all of those good places, Facebook and Twitter. You can find me pretty much anywhere by searching that crazy blank last name. I also do the Glassbox podcast where we read possible source text for the Book of Mormon. And I'm a co-host of the My Book of Mormon podcast where we're reading through the Doctrine and Covenants. So got a lot of irons in the fire. And there's also chapters of my current book that's coming out. I post up chapters every 2 weeks, and that's hosted on realbookofmormon.org. So lots of places to find me. If you're interested in diving down the rabbit hole that is Mormonism, I wish you the best of luck, and I hope to see you on the other side.
Right on. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks
to everybody for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I love talking with people like this.
And this week you can catch me on Super Judgy Wankers, where I will be talking about gun control with libertarians. Should be loads of fun.
This was the Wayward Atheist podcast. Follow us on Spreaker, Spreaker.com/waywardatheists. You can email us at waywardatheistpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter @waywardatheists and on facebook.com/waywardatheists. If you enjoy our content, feel free to leave us a review on iTunes and feel free to support us at patreon.com/waywardatheists.